welcome to the stage Cecilia Raspanti.
Hello, thank you. I'm here today to talk about digital fabrication, textile, and fashion, and how actually these three go together. Because digital fabrication, at some point along the way, completely changed my life as a fashion and textile designer. Textiles are a very interesting part of our society because they're everywhere. Everything is covered in textiles. And actually here, it's literally everything. One of the first things that get in touch with our bodies daily when we're born. It's the first things we get covered with that touches our skin. And it's what we use to screen ourselves from the environment and from others every day. And as a fashion and textile designer, my fascination for textiles goes beyond any imaginable possibility. I look at textiles all day, and most of the times we all do this, and we do this unconsciously because we're touching them, we're feeling them, and we're analyzing how they're made, how they make us feel. So they're very important parts for all of us. And being a fashion and textile designer and being trained as such, actually, the whole world is a sort of play field. It's a sort of creative learning place where, while you go around and live your life, you enjoy textiles. And if we look at the way we actually are trained and the way we want to work in textiles until now, the way we go to school and we become fashion and textile designers, our heads look a little bit like this. They look like sort of museums, like cabinets full of curiosities. This is because constantly we're asked to be unique, to be different, to find a voice, to interpret things and life and materials in a certain way and give them a certain shape that impersonates who we are. But when we're doing this, to be unique, to be the one, we hide all of these ideas. We keep them close enough in our heads and we don't share them. And our heads start looking a little bit like this. And this doesn't bring us very far, unfortunately. What we do at Vac Society is actually opening up all of this. We try to open up and connect people, technology, art, science, and technology together and see what happens through society and how it can impact society. We do this since 23 years, almost 24, in the middle of Amsterdam in this lovely sort of castle. We're about 50 people. We're a no-profit organization. And we really have the aim of understanding how technology can actually help us go further and how we can be less scared or how we can use it to figure out other things in many ways, in different ways in society. We do this through 6 research groups, and under those there's laboratories. And they sort of represent the different phases of society. So we have creative care that actually takes the whole chain from a patient to an institute to a therapist, mixes them together and see how they can interact differently and how we can open up possibilities for them to communicate. And creative learning that does more or less the same thing with students, with teachers, with institutions. Future heritage, again, the similar things with knowledge institutes. And future internet instead works around big data, privacy, and how actually society as a whole and people can actually understand it and empower themselves through it. And then we have the beautiful open wet lab, which we opened 4.5 years ago. It's a biology lab. And it's an open lab. It's one of the first open labs in the Netherlands where people can just pop in, try out things, even though they know nothing about biology. Because people like me, like many of you, I guess, we don't know anything about biology, about bacteria and microorganisms. But when you make this knowledge accessible, there is a lot that can happen. And then we, of course, have FabLab Amsterdam that has been open for 10 years now. In a month or so, we have the 10th anniversary. And the TextileLab. At the FabLab Amsterdam is actually the place where I fell in love with digital fabrication. And it's the place where every day I fall in love with digital fabrication. It's a place where I started going and experimenting and trying to understand technologies. And I don't have any formation with technology or 3D modeling. I didn't know anything of all of this. I was trained as a straightforward fashion designer with a specialization in knitwear, and I loved materials. That was it. But when you start playing around in a fab lab and you understand what the possibilities are with all these technologies, your brain sort of explodes. You think like, oh my God, I can do 100 things. I can take this machine. It's like, okay, it's a big milling machine. Can I use it for something else? So you go and you ask like, can we paint with this machine? And they're like, paint? What do you mean paint? It's like, I want to paint on textiles. I know it's made for wood. Can we use it for something else? And this is what Fab Lab do. At least what they did for me. And this is the first collection I created. It was a sort of proof of concept, the beginning of my research, where I wanted to understand and analyze how digital fabrication, what it would do to me as a fashion designer, to my process. Would it be a good place for fashion designers? Will it completely change the way we work, the process? Or would it not impact at all? Would it be like slowing me down? I didn't know. Well, the outcomes for me slowly and slowly came out more and more clearer. Because at the end we had a collection entirely made in a fab lab where actually techniques of digital fabrication and heritage techniques, highly inspired by nature, come together. And they sort of merged into both being constructive and decorative patterns, which is something we aim for in design, in fashion. And technology was exactly there to translate what was impossible for me all by myself by hand. And after a couple of years of informal research, we did a lot of small projects in fashion, in textiles within Vac Society, but we didn't really have a dedicated space or area. We had a very amazing chance to open about 1.5 years ago, the TextileLab Amsterdam. So this is sort of like an expansion pack to the Fab Lab, or this is the way I envision it. It's a place where we bring together students, craftsmen, young brands, people in the industry. Every time it's slightly different, but we all have in common the same values that we have in common with Vac Society, this opening up of things and finding out how can we collaborate, how can we actually make this happen, how can we change all of the things and question all of the things that we don't enjoy in how we do things today. Because most of all, what we lost along the way for me is actually questioning. Questioning how things are done today, how they were done yesterday, how they were done, how they could be done tomorrow. And when we find alternatives, question them again. And this is why we experiment with craftsmanship and digital fabrication with our heritage, to keep it alive, to translate it, to see what are the other possibilities. But also to share the knowledge and really build upon each other's knowledge. Because by yourself, you have your own little world, but the moment we start working together and actually gluing all of the pieces together and understand how something that worked out for you might not work out for me, but might work out for somebody else, we create magic, because we create global networks of humans that actually interact and can bring change. And this is, for me, what we are missing in the textile and fashion industry, sharing this knowledge and the evolution of it. And in all this research, we started having evenings with students, with young professionals, and we were starting to really map out, like, what is missing? What are we missing? What did I miss when I started with digital fabrication? What were they missing? So we took sort of my work, my steps from a fashion designer into crafts that fell in love into digital and translated those into smaller workshops that connected, actually created an educational program that was not only feeding my need to understand if this will work for somebody else, but also trying to answer their questions. Because at the end of the day, it's all about learning and teaching. I mean, this is the way we interact anyway, and often unconsciously. But when we put it into practice for real, and we learn and experiment and discover something new, and then we can pass it on and share it completely and see what happens to somebody else, then all of a sudden we're fulfilled. And that image I had at the beginning, the cabinet of curiosities, the museum, actually is a museum that keeps changing and replenishing itself rather than becoming empty. Yeah. This is supposed to be a short video. Nope. This was a short video of the academy that we actually created last year, based on our research. We had 11 participants from the Netherlands, from the States, from Germany. It was really interesting because, as I was saying, we took my steps and we sort of translated them and we saw the impact that they had on them. Maartje, which is an amazing student, she did a beautiful work, actually from a fashion designer that was setting up a small brand, started showing at Fashion Week this summer. And what we loved the most, of course, is seeing all those little bits of the things that she picked up in the Fab Lab, in the technologies and the techniques, implementing them. And she was like, this has completely changed my life. I'm like, it works. It's not just me. It's a lot of people. Because we see it in Fab Labs on a broader scale. But when we focus it and we look at it from one field, you see the magic so much shinier, so much more happening. This was the program. We were really looking at from 3D scanning to printing on textiles, creating modular parts, dyeing. It was 16 weeks, and I believe this was our second week. This is one of my favorite outcomes of the academy. It's actually a 3D scan of all of our students, where we're all a bit like, oh my God, that's us. We don't want to look at this. But we did that step to actually question certain sizes, the way we construct sizes in fashion. All of these mannequins are actually scans modified in 3D with Rhino, and then sliced up and laser cut in a laser. And they're all mediums. The first question we asked the students actually was, okay, so who of you is a medium? We had these mannequins out. What do you have in common? Nothing. There is nothing in these bodies that they have in common, and they're all the same size. Isn't this a bit weird? How did we end up having sizes like small, medium, and large completely standardized when we have technologies like 3D scanning, where we could actually make made-to-measure clothing that is made for our bodies, and we can create mannequins that are made for our bodies? How is nobody's exploring this? There was something weird there, so we started asking them more and more questions. And every class we gave actually did this. Here we were looking at modular clothing. We were looking at actually, can we pass again from a small to a medium to a large, swap clothing? You give it to your friend, but she has a little bit wider hips. It's a little bit tinier here, she needs a different shape. Can we then actually just add a module here and there and create a piece of clothing that fits? And it works, again. So they came up with the solutions because we didn't have them. We gave them the tools. And we did the same thing here with dyeing. Dyeing is something we don't talk about much in the textile industry. It's a very polluting process. And since the 60s, we have synthetic dyes that imitate natural dyeing, which is everything we had before. This is some turmeric dye on textiles. There is wool, there is silk, there is many different textiles in there. So we always do this sort of step of looking back at how we used to do things, look at how we do them today, and how else we can do them, and then actually question again how we could do them tomorrow. And is that the solution? So here we're looking at bacteria dyeing, something we've been researching in the last 2 years, and it's incredible. It's really fun. It's a sort of collaboration. It's a sort of understanding and an exploration of actually how microorganisms can produce dyes with which we can dye textiles. We can extract it. We can let them grow on this. And this is the pieces from our students where they actually let the bacteria dye on the folded textiles to create really interesting patterns as a sort of collaboration. And these were some more experiments. And of course, their first question was like, we are not biologists. I'm like, I'm not a biologist. I don't know anything about microbiology and bacteria and things. But when you break down this knowledge into little bits, it's accessible for everybody, and everybody can experiment and try out with them. And maybe find better solutions than actually the people who are into it. Because you come from outside, you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't have any expectations either. And here we were experimenting with some 3D printing on textiles to create foldable structures. But at some point, we had all of these samples, and they were never ending. And somehow, me and my colleague were the only two people who actually knew which sample was what, and how we could reproduce them. So you start having all these people asking you, you're like, I don't have time for this. I'm like, wait, this is completely wrong, completely against the way we work. Everybody should be able to access this information. So in the last year, we started developing this material archive, which is an online, offline material archive, and it's fully open source. That means that as soon as it will be online, that's actually next week, so it's a sort of preview, everybody will be able to both add materials to it, take from it, give back, give feedback, say, by the way, I tried the same recipe, it doesn't work for me. It's like, what else did you use? What are the differences? And then, or say like, oh, mine came out stretchy and yours is very stiff. I used a little bit more of this. And if we can share this information and build upon each other's knowledge, we can actually go much further with research, way faster. And there are many material libraries around the world, and many beautiful ones. What I've always been missing is like the DIY side of them, the things that you can like take a recipe and actually do it yourself, do it in your lab, in your fab lab, in your bio lab, experiment and give feedback. Because usually material libraries are of industrial processes, and we miss completely this DIY side that's just really growing and really changing the world. But in the last year, we've also been creating an amazing program that actually started 2 weeks ago. And this is when you say, like, your dreams are coming true, this is it. We did this with Anastasia Pistofido from Fab Lab Barcelona, that's sitting there in the back, and Fiore Basile from Fab Lab Toscana. And this is our dream taking shape. And as it says, it's a journey at the intersection between textile, soft fabrication, and biology. It's a new textile academy. It's called Fabricademy. We started last week, Tuesday, so about 10 days ago. And it's a beautiful program in which we invited, actually, experts worldwide to come together and teach a class. And it's all the people that love what they're doing and take so much care in it and have the same aim as we have, train a new group of professional, new generation that actually is capable of understanding the possibilities within all of these technologies, being comfortable with each one of them. And they don't need to fully go into depth with all of them, but they know how they work. They can switch and actually collaborate. They can say, like, you love parametric design, computational, generative design, and I like this part better, and how can we make this happen? How can we collaborate and push forward to change, actually, this industry, to make it happen? And these are the classes again. We started, so we had, this Tuesday we had the digital bodies class, where we looked at how the impression of a human body becomes digital, and how you interact with it, how you scan it, how you can cut it, how you can create it, and how artists in the years actually have been working on this. And it's really exciting because it's week 2. So next week, in the meanwhile, the students all over the world will actually be experiment on this topic, because we have 17 laboratories across the world, from Montreal, Vancouver, Shanghai, there is Peru, there is double location in Spain, there is double location in France. There is a lot of people that are trying to see, does this work for me? What does it mean for me? Can I teach this to somebody else? Can this impact them? And we don't know where it's going. So actually all I'm asking is, have a look at it, take a peek, and see what it could do for you, for somebody else you know, and join. We have 70 laboratories, hopefully next year more, and we're really looking at how we can do this together in a shared, decentralized, collaborative way, worldwide, creating a knowledge network that can really build upon each other to make it happen. Thank you. And if you want to talk to me,
and if anybody wants to talk to her, and she'll also be involved with the roundtable in just a very few